They found the bodies 4 years later, perfectly preserved in the ice. The leader was not alone. His loyal porter sat beside him, frozen solid in a protective embrace. The note in the pocket simply read, "Help us." The sound is the first thing that breaks the mind. It is not a wind. It is a physical weight, a roaring ocean of air crashing against the rock face of the Rakyot Peak. Inside the trembling canvas walls of Camp 4, the survivors press their hands over their ears. But the vibration travels through the frozen ground, up through the soles of their heavy leather boots, and into their bones. It is the sound of a planet trying to shake off parasites. It is July 15th, 1934, and the mountain has been screaming for 9 days straight. Outside, the world has ceased to exist. There is no up, no down, no sky, no earth. There is only the whiteout. A churning, blinding soup of ice crystals moving at hurricane speeds. To step out is to be sanded down by a million microscopic razors. Yet, the men in the tent are watching the entrance flaps, their breath pluming in the freezing air. They are watching and waiting for ghosts. Then, the impossible happens. The fabric of the storm tears open for a fraction of a second. A silhouette stumbles out of the gray void. It does not look human. It moves with a jerky, broken rhythm, dragging one leg behind the other like a marionette with cut strings. The sentries shout, their voices snatched away instantly by the gale. They rush out, leaning into the wind at 45 degrees, fighting to reach the figure before it collapses and is buried forever. When they reach him, they recoil in horror. This is not the strong, laughing Sherpa who left them weeks ago. This is a biological wreck. Tseh-ring is a scarecrow made of frostbite and exhaustion. His face is a mask of black necrotic tissue, where the sun and cold have burned the skin away to the bone. His eyes are recessed so deep into his skull they look like 2 bullet holes in a sheet of parchment. He is encrusted in a shell of ice, his clothing torn, his gloves shredded. He has descended from the silver saddle, through the death zone, without food, without shelter, alone in a storm that kills in minutes. They drag him into the tent, the sudden silence inside hitting them like a physical blow. The smell of the storm clings to him, a sharp scent of ozone and deep freeze mixed with the sweet, rotting odor of gangrene. He collapses onto a sleeping bag. His chest heaves, a desperate, rattling wheeze that bubbles in his throat. He tries to lift a hand to point back up the mountain towards the invisible summit, but his fingers are locked in a permanent, frozen claw. He looks at the expedition deputy, his gaze empty and 1,000 miles away. He does not need to speak. The message is carved into every line of his ruined face. The others are not coming down. To understand the horror of the end, one must witness the blinding beauty of the beginning. The camera pulls back from the rotting survivor in the tent and flies upward, soaring thousands of feet into the thin, razor-sharp air. Time rewinds. The screaming wind vanishes, replaced by a silence so profound it rings in the ears like a crystal bell. It is July 6th, 1934. 9 days before the catastrophe. We are standing on the Zilber Saddle, the Silver Saddle. It is a massive, glittering plateau of snow resting at 7,400 meters. The world here is not gray and dead. It is vividly, violently alive. The sky is not blue. It is a deep, bruised violet, dark enough to see stars at noon. The sun is not a distant lamp, but a physical weight on the shoulders. It strikes the ice and reflects upward, burning the inside of the nostrils and searing the roof of the mouth. In this dazzling arena, 5 men and 11 Sherpas stand like conquerors. Vili Merkel, the leader, adjusts his wool cap and squints against the glare. Beside him stand Uli Wieland and Vilo Vel Zenbach. They are the elite, the finest mountaineers of their generation. They are strong. Their hearts pump thick, oxygenated blood through warm limbs. They breathe the thin air like champagne. They look up and they smile. The summit of Nanga Parbat is right there. It looks deceptively, teasingly close. From the flat expanse of the saddle, the final peak rises as a gentle slope of snow and rock, curving effortlessly into the stratosphere. It feels as if one could reach out a gloved hand and touch the apex. They have spent weeks fighting the vertical ice walls below. They have dragged their heavy canvas tents and wooden crates up the spine of the giant. They have suffered, and they have prevailed. Now, the prize is waiting. This is the moment, the exact second where destiny splits. A fearful man would turn back. A desperate man would drop his pack and run for the top immediately, racing the sunset. But these men are neither fearful nor desperate. They are confident. They are suffering from the fatal intoxication of high altitude. The weather is perfect. The barometer is steady. The Sherpas are laughing behind their dark goggles, smoking cigarettes in the calm air. Why rush? Why risk exhaustion when victory can be savored? Merkel makes the decision that will erase them from the earth. He decides they will not attack the summit today. They will camp. They will sleep one more night on this beautiful plateau, rest their muscles, and walk to glory in the morning sunlight. It is a decision made in the comfort of success. It is the logic of civilized men applied to a savage place. They pitch Camp 8 on the flat expanse of the saddle. They laugh as they drive the bamboo markers into the firm snow. They boil water on their brass stoves and dream of the medals waiting for them in Berlin. They write entries in their journals about the majestic view, about the curve of the earth visible on the horizon. They feel invincible. They do not see the trap. Nanga Parbat is not a pile of rock. It is a predatory beast that has been holding its breath. The perfect weather is a lure. The mountain has allowed them to climb this high, has seduced them into the death zone, specifically to cut off their escape. The silence on the plateau is not peace. It is the deep inhalation before a scream. As the sun begins to dip below the jagged horizon, casting long, purple shadows across the silver saddle, the temperature plummets instantly. The air grows heavy and metallic. The men crawl into their sleeping bags, warm and full of hope. They close their eyes, believing they are kings of the world. They do not know that they are already dead. They do not know that the sun they just watched set will be the last sun they ever see. The door to the cage has just swung shut, and the lock has clicked. The dream ends not with a whisper, but with a collision. Sometime after midnight, the air pressure drops so violently it makes the ears pop. Then the hammer falls. The wind hits Camp 8 with the force of a derailing train. It is not a gust. It is a solid object, composed of air moving at 90 miles an hour. The heavy canvas tents, anchored with ice axes and hope, flatten instantly. They snap and thrash like dying birds, pinning the men inside against the hard floor of the glacier. There is no morning on July 7th. There is only a shifting gradient of gray. The sun is gone. The sky is gone. The visible world has shrunk to the length of a man's arm. The snow is not falling down. It is flying horizontally, driven by the hurricane to scour the flesh from the face. The noise is absolute. It drowns out commands, screams, and thoughts. It is a constant, deafening roar that vibrates in the teeth. It is the sound of the planet rejecting human life. Panic, cold and sharp, pierces the haze of hypoxia. The climbers realize the trap has sprung. The summit is forgotten. The medals are forgotten. The only objective now is to descend, to get off the silver saddle before the wind flays them alive. They crawl out of the ruins of the tents, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. They try to find the bamboo poles they planted yesterday, the thin wands marking the safe path back to the lower camps. But the mountain has erased them. The wind has snapped them or buried them under tons of drift. The path is gone. The retreat begins in chaos. It is a blind stumble through a milk-white void. The rope teams disintegrate. Men become singular, shivering atoms fighting a universe that wants them dead. They stagger downward, guided only by gravity and fear. The cold is not passive. It is an active, biting presence. It seeps through the wool, through the gabardine, turning sweat into ice against the skin. Every breath is a struggle, sucking in needles of frozen moisture that lacerate the lungs. Wieland is the first to break. Yesterday, he was an Olympian, a man of iron will. Today, he is a hollow shell. The altitude has stripped his blood of oxygen, leaving his brain starving and confused. He moves slower and slower. His legs are heavy logs that refuse to lift. The wind pushes him, and he lets it take him. He is stumbling towards Camp 7, the next safe haven down the ridge. He is close to salvation. Through the swirling whiteness, the ghostly outline of the tents at Camp 7 is visible. It is shelter. It is life. It is only a few dozen yards away. But inside Wieland's mind, the lights are going out one by one. The deadly comfort of the glacier apathy takes hold. He does not feel fear anymore. He feels a terrible, seductive warmth. He stops. He looks at the tent ahead, then looks down at his boots. He sits in the snow. It is a gentle motion, like a child sitting down to rest after a game. He draws his knees to his chest. The storm rages around him, screaming its fury. But Wieland is quiet. He does not struggle. He does not try to crawl the last few feet. He simply exhales. The drift begins to pile against his back immediately, filling the folds of his jacket, covering his hood. Within minutes, he is not a man anymore. He is just a mound of white on a field of white. The first tribute has been paid. The mountain has tasted blood, and it is not satisfied. Time ceases to be a linear progression of hours and minutes. It dissolves into a gray, screaming smear. The storm does not break. For 9 endless days, the hurricane sits on the shoulder of Nanga Parbat, grinding the expedition into the ice. Inside the shredded remains of the tents, the men are no longer waiting for the weather to clear. They are waiting to die. the supplies are gone. The last drop of fuel for the cookers vanished days ago. There is no fire to melt the ice. There is no water. They are surrounded by millions of tons of frozen moisture, yet they are dying of thirst. The thirst is a madness that claws at the back of the throat. It overrides instinct. It overrides logic. One by one, the men succumb to the fatal error. They scoop up handfuls of the powder snow and cram it into their cracked, bleeding mouths. It does not hydrate them. It burns like acid. It sucks the last precious calories of heat from their cores, lowering their body temperatures, speeding up the inevitable freezing of the blood. It is a fatal agreement pact with the glacier. The cold begins its architectural work on the human form. It starts at the extremities. The fingers and toes lose sensation first, going numb and clumsy. Then the pain stops. This is the danger signal. The skin turns a waxy, pale yellow, then a mottled violet, and finally a hard, dead black. It is the color of charcoal. The hands of the climbers transform into useless, frozen claws. They cannot undo a zipper. They cannot tie a knot. They cannot grip an ice axe. To move, they must crawl on their elbows and knees, dragging their dead limbs behind them like paralyzed animals. Inside the flapping canvas of Camp 7, the air smells of unwashed bodies and the sweet, cloying scent of necrotic flesh. Vilo Vel Zenbach lies in the center of this horror. He was the driving force of the expedition, the man of infinite energy. Now, he is a statue carved from pain. His strength has been metabolized by the cold. He does not speak. He stares up at the trembling roof of the tent, watching the ice crystals form on the fabric. On the night of July 13th, the end comes for him. It is not dramatic. There are no last words of wisdom, no cinematic speeches. The machinery of his body simply runs out of fuel. His breathing hitches a dry, rattling sound in the darkness, and then it stops. The silence that follows is louder than the storm outside. The survivors, Merkel and the Sherpas, look at the body. They are too exhausted to weep. They are too weak to drag him out into the snow. They are too broken to dig a grave. The reality of their situation settles over them with the weight of a tombstone. They are sharing a coffin with a corpse. Survival strips away the veneer of civilization. There is no ceremony. There is only the brutal arithmetic of life and death. To stay is to join him. To leave is a terrifying gamble. They make the choice. They crawl out of the tent, into the white fury of the wind, leaving Viovel Zenbach where he lies. He remains there, frozen in time, the eternal guardian of Camp 7, a black shape in a white room, waiting for a spring that will never come. The survivors turn their backs on their friend and begin the crawl toward the abyss, leaving their humanity behind with the dead. They reach the ridge known as the Moor en Kof. It is a jagged, black tooth of rock jutting out from the white spine of the mountain. Here, the geography forces a final reckoning. The path creates a bottleneck, a razor edge between the sheer drop to the glaciers miles below and the impossible wall of ice above. The storm, sensing their weakness, redoubles its fury. It screams over the ridge, whipping the snow into a frenzied vortex that blinds the eyes and chokes the breath. In this white hell, the chain of command dissolves completely. There are no leaders, no followers, only dying animals struggling against gravity. Willy Merkel, the man who dreamed of this expedition, the man who promised glory, finally reaches the limit of his endurance. His body has been consuming itself for days. The reserves are gone. The muscle fibers are eaten away. He stumbles. It is not a trip or a slip. It is a total collapse of the structural integrity of his frame. He falls to his knees, then forward onto his chest. He tries to push himself up with his ice axe, but his arms tremble uncontrollably and give way. He lies in the drift, a heap of frozen clothing and broken ambition. The mountain has claimed him. Tseh-ring and Gayle stop. They look down at their leader. They know what this means. In the death zone, a man who cannot walk is already a corpse. To stay is fatal agreement. To leave is the only chance of life. Tseh-ring, his face a mask of frostbite, looks at Gayle. He motions down the mountain. The gesture is frantic, desperate. We must go. We must move now. But Gayle does not move. He looks at the shivering form of Merkel. He looks at the terrifying descent that lies ahead. And then he makes a choice that defies the primal instinct of self-preservation. He shakes his head. He drives his ice axe into the snow, anchoring himself. He sits down beside Merkel. He begins to clear the snow from the leader's face, a tender, domestic gesture in the middle of a hurricane. It is an act of supreme, baffling loyalty. Gayle is strong enough to descend. He has the blood of the high country in his veins. He could follow Tseh-ring. He could live to see the grass and the trees again, but he refuses to abandon his sahib. He chooses to freeze to death rather than violate the bond of the rope. He pulls his coat tighter around himself and settles in to wait for the end. He becomes a living gravestone for his friend. Tseh-ring screams at him, the sound torn away by the wind before it leaves his lips. He begs, he waves his arms, but Gayle is immovable. He has turned his face to stone. He is already part of the mountain. The realization hits Tseh-ring with the force of a physical blow. He is alone. The link to humanity has been severed. He turns away. He has to. The survival instinct, ancient and ruthless, takes the controls. He takes one step, then another, moving away from the two huddled figures. He descends into the gray void, sliding, crawling, weeping frozen tears. He looks back once. The storm is already weaving a shroud for them. The dark shape of the Moor and Kopf looms above, indifferent and eternal. At its base, the two small dots are fading, being swallowed by the white noise. Merkel and Gayle are no longer climbing. They are no longer fighting. They are simply waiting for the cold to stop the beating of their hearts. Tseh-ring turns his face to the abyss and begins the long, lonely nightmare of the descent. The only witness to a tragedy that the snow is already busy erasing. The storm that swallowed the 1934 expedition eventually exhausted itself. The wind died. The clouds parted. The sun returned to the silver saddle, illuminating a landscape that had become a graveyard. For 4 long years, the mountain held its secrets. The snow fell, buried the dead, compressed them, and preserved them in a tomb of perfect, sterile ice. The seasons cycled. The monsoon came and went. The world below marched toward war, but on the high slopes of Nanga Parbat, time stood still. In 1938, a new team of German climbers returns to the mountain. They are not just explorers, they are undertakers. They climb with a heavy silence, moving up the same ridge, following the phantom footsteps of the lost. The weather, in a cruel twist of irony, is flawless. The sky is a hard, brilliant sapphire. The air is still. As they approach the Mohrenkopf, the jagged black ridge where the retreat collapsed, they see something that does not belong to the geology of the Himalayas. It is not rock. It is not ice. It is the unnatural color of faded gabardine and wool. They stop. The sound of their breathing is loud in the thin air. They have found them. Willy Merkel and Gay Lay are not skeletons. The cold has mummified them, turning their skin into hard, dark parchment, freezing their final expressions in place. They lie exactly where they fell 4 years ago. The tableau is heartbreakingly clear. The Sherpa. Gay Lay is positioned to protect his leader. Even in death, his body is curled around the white man, a final, futile attempt to share warmth, to shield him from the wind that stripped the life from their bones. It is a monument to loyalty carved in flesh and ice. One of the climbers kneels beside the body of Willy Merkel. The fabric of his jacket is stiff, frozen solid. With trembling hands, the climber reaches into the breast pocket. He pulls out a folded piece of paper. It is brittle, threatening to disintegrate at the touch. It is a voice from the grave. The handwriting is erratic, the scrawl of a man whose fingers were turning into wood, whose brain was shutting down from hypoxia. The ink is faded, but the message screams across the years. We lie here. We are without food. We are sick. Help us. The climber reads the words, and the silence of the mountain seems to deepen. There is no help. There never was. The plea was whispered into a hurricane that did not care. The note is carefully refolded and placed away, a relic of a hope that died slowly, hour by agonized hour. The camera pulls back for the final time. We leave the bodies where they lie, tiny specks on the vast, indifferent flank of the naked mountain. The sun begins to set. The ice turns from white to gold, then to a blood red, and finally to a cold, steel blue. The mountain glows with a terrifying, ethereal beauty. It does not mourn. It does not remember. It simply exists, a titan of rock and ice that allows men to crawl upon its skin for a moment before shaking them off like dust. The wind picks up again, whistling through the rocks, singing the same song it sang in 1934, a song without a melody, echoing forever in the void.